Hello guys, welcome to our PHP lecture 11. It's Silas Tops, your PHP lecture. In this lecture guys, I'm just wanna quickly show you how to write a program using a nested for loop in PHP. If you watched our previous lecture, which is our lecture 9 and lecture 10, we're demonstrating on how to write a program using a for loop, and I showed you guys the link between a for loop and a while loop. In this code, I'm just want to quickly show you a code in a nested for loop. And in our next lecture, which is gonna be lecture 12, I'm going to show you also how to write the same code that you wrote using a nested for loop. How we are going to rewrite it using a nested while loop. So there is a link between a for loop and a while loop, guys. Any code that you can write using a for loop, you can still be able to write it using a while loop. So I'm going to actually demonstrate the same thing also with a nested for loop and a nested while loop. In this course, without wasting time, guys, what I want to demonstrate, I'm going to actually want to draw a code. I want to write a code that can draw this shape triangle, right angle triangle of asterisks. And this triangle will be having how many rows? Will be having 10 rows and 10 columns. So I need to draw a triangle of asterisk with 10 rows and 10 columns. So in this triangle, I'm going to use a nested for loop. A nested for loop is simply means a for loop inside another for loop. So if I've got a for loop inside another for loop, that's what we call a nested for loop. So the outer for loop will be representing my number of rows here. The outer for loop will represent my number of rows, and the inner for loop will be representing my number of columns. So let me actually show you quickly, guys, how to write a code that will draw that right angle triangle of asterisks using a nested for loop. So I have to come here to my editor, guys. As usual, you know that the editor that I'm always recommend for your students is Notepad++. Let me just open my editor. I think I've got initial code for my HTML. Let me just paste it here. Okay, is this one. So the heading for today, guys, it's a nested for loop, demonstrating how to apply what nested for loop. So inside here, I want to, you all know that what you are writing here is a PHP code. So you must have an opening tag and closing tag for PHP. Let me just put an opening tag for PHP quickly, which is PHP. Then I close my tag with question mark and this one. So the first thing that I'm gonna write, guys, I need my for loop. Your for loop, we always know that I did demonstrate in our last lecture. A for loop, we have got two expression inside. So this is the syntax of a for loop. You write a for, then you put the syntax here. So here inside, guys, you're going to write the first variable is the starting point of your iteration of your loop. So my starting point, I'm going to declare a variable called rows, because this outer for loop is representing my number of rows. So when I'm counting my rows, I need to count from the first row, which is row number 1. So I simply initialize this. Row number 1 is my starting point of my loop. So I simply say variable row 1, and I initialize it to 1. Then put a semicolon. Then I want to write a condition. The next thing I'm going to write a condition. I want this for loop to keep on executed as long as this condition is still true, which means as long as my number of rows are still not yet 10, I need this loop to keep on executing. So I simply have to say row, variable row less than or equal to 10. So as long as the rows is still less than or equal to 10, I want this for loop to keep on executing. So my last expression is simply the increment. We did actually last lecture, guys, I demonstrated about the increment and decrement operator. So here I simply have to keep on increasing my number of rows. I'm starting from 1, then I have to increment plus 1 becomes 2, 3, 4, sending me to the next row until to the row 10. So I have to put an increment of my row here. Then I'll simply say variable row plus plus. That's how I increment this one. So my for loop, you've got this first represent my starting, this one represent my condition, and this one represent my increment. So once you write your for loop, you know that your for loop must have an opening and closing curly bracket. So as long as the condition for this for loop is true here, everything that is inside these two brackets must be executed. Keep on executed until this condition becomes false. Then you are going to be sent out. So inside here, inside this for loop, it's where I have to put my inner for loop. Your inner for loop, let me just write for loop. You've got the same syntax. So inner for loop, I have to, this inner for loop is representing my columns. So my columns also, I count my columns from column number 1. So I have to declare a variable called column here. I'll simply say call. Then I initialize it to column number 1 because I'm starting from column number 1. Then I want to put a condition. Since this condition, guys, I want to keep only, if I'm at row number 2, I want to also display 2 columns. If I'm at row number 3, I'm going to display also 3 columns. And the number of columns must be equal to my number of rows, it depending which row number my program is. If my program is at number 7, which means I'm going to have also 7 columns. So how do I actually come up with that? I'll simply have to come here in my code. In my code here, which means my condition should be variable column, while variable column is less than or equal to variable row. I want to keep on executing. Once this condition, it becomes false, then I'll be sent out of this for loop. So also I have to put an increment. My third expression should be an increment of column. So my column should be keep on incremented here because I'm starting counting from column 1. Then it should be incremented with +1. So I simply say column plus plus. So this for loop also have got its own opening QL bracket and closing QL bracket. So the code, as long as this condition is true, the code inside these 2 brackets here, open, starting from here, ending here, the code inside must be keep on executed. So the code that I need to execute is simply, I need to print my star. So I simply say echo what? Echo my asterisk. I'll simply say echo my asterisk. But after I display my asterisk, I need to have a space here, because you see I've got a space after each and every asterisk here. So to come up with that space, I must also concatenate. I need to concatenate my code here with a space. So I simply concatenate with a space. Then I'll put a semicolon here. Then also, how am I going to send, because this for loop is the one that will print the asterisk along the row. Once that row, I'm done printing the asterisk on that row, I have to be sent to the next row. So I must also have, once this condition becomes false, I must send to the next row. How am I going to be sent to the next row? I'll simply have to put an echo. I simply have to say echo here. Echo what? Echo, you know that the tag that will send you to the next line is an HTML tag, which is BR. So I'll simply say echo BR here and put a semicolon. So once this, I finished printing the stars along a certain row. If I'm at row number 1, I come here and printing all the stars at row number 1. Then once this condition becomes false, I will come here. Then I'll send, I'll echo BR. Then I'll send to the next line. Then I'll come to this, the end of my outer for loop. Then once I come here, I'll send back to this one. Then I increment my number of row to row number 2. Then I'll check the condition if 2 is less than or equal to 10. Then if the condition is true, then I'll send again inside here. Once I come inside, this for loop will start executing from the column 1 again and keep on executing this until it becomes false. Once it becomes false, then I'll send here, then I'll echo BR and I'll send to the next line. Then I'll come here, then I'll increment the row to row plus 1 to 3. Then I'll check the condition is 3 less than 10. Yes. Then I'll send I'm going to be sent inside again and execute this for loop until it becomes false. Then I'll echo BR to be sent to the next line. Then comes, this is how the nested loop execute, guys. It keep on looping until this condition of the outer loop becomes false. Once this condition becomes false, then I'm going to be sent outside this one, then the program will terminate. So now, since I'm done writing my code, let me just save my profile. You come here, then click Save As. Once you say Save As, look for your C drive. I'm here at C drive, look for XAMPP folder. On the XAMPP folder, look for htdocs. In the htdocs, I'm going to click a new folder here. Then let me give it the name of my project. Let me say prog 11, since you are then press enter. Then the project of my code, I'm going to give it a name project.php. Then I'm going to save it in my project, my folder name, my project folder name, which is prog 11. Click open, then save. Once I save, you see its project here is displayed on my as a project. So what I need to do now, I have to go and look for my XAMPP control panel. XAMPP control panel. Once my XAMPP control panel is open, it's taking time to open. It's taking a while. Okay. Once it's open, I have to make sure that I start Apache and also click the start button for MySQL. Once these two buttons are started, then I can minimize. Then I have to go to my favorite browser. Click my favorite browser. Once I click my favorite browser here, I have to type localhost / then the name of my project, which is prog 11. Prog 11, then press enter. Once I press enter, guys, I'll see my project being, you see here, I don't know, my program is being freezing here. Okay, I'll come here, then I'll click the project here. You see, once I run my project, the asterisk are being displayed here. How many asterisk, the triangle of asterisk are being displayed? This is how we display that code, guys. If I had not compare my outer loop, compare my column and row, maybe I say column less than or equal to 10 here, I was going to have a triangle here instead of what? I was going to have a square instead of what? Instead of a triangle. So you have to play around with different syntax, guys. You can use a nested for loop to draw a box of numbers, a Sudoku, a box, and also the matrices in mathematics. You can also doing all those things using a nested for loop. So the nested for loop actually have a broader application in programming. There's a lot that you can do using a nested for loop. So I hope, guys, you understand how you actually write a code that will require you to use a nested for loop. So this is all I can demonstrate for you, guys. I hope you understood what we actually wrote here in this nested for loop, and I wish you all the best. Keep on practicing, guys, and be safe. I hope to see you in our next lecture. Thank you.